crazy talk.
Twin Cities News Talk, AM 1130, 103.5 FM. Tomorrow on the show, it is the Friday Roundtable with Nick Zerwas and comedian Brian Miller. Plus, if you're listening right now at this time tomorrow in 24 hours, you will have a chance to win Bon Jovi tickets with our parody song contest. That's pretty amazing.
That's really amazing.
Pretty amazing.
You know who is also a Bon Jovi fan? It's Katie Pavlich. I don't know that if that's true at all.
Be a Bon Jovi fan, right? Especially with the feathers in the hair. I mean, that's a pretty good fashion statement.
True story right there. Fox News contributor, editor at townhall.com, also author of, wrote the book on Fast and Furious, Assault and Flattery. Been a couple of weeks, Katie.
Someone who could really pull off some Bon Jovi cosplay, I think.
You think so?
Maybe.
I think so.
I can't scream into the microphone like he can. He has that on me.
You know, Katie, we have a story here, just real quick, because it actually it relates to you to a certain degree. Our Minnesota hate crimes on the rise. Police make it a guessing game. Before we get into that, though, looking at your Twitter feed a moment ago, you got some hate crime going on there.
Hey, yeah, people calling me a Nazi. People telling me my profile picture is inappropriate. I'm not a good Christian. The internet is always an interesting place to hang around.
Especially these days. We were talking earlier this morning that I know the judge in Michigan, kind of dancing around a couple of different stories here, but the judge in Michigan basically saying that Jill Stein, doesn't have a leg to stand on in terms of that recount and solidifying the win for Trump. Do you think we're almost past this phase of those that have failed to accept the results of this election, or do you think that we still have to get through December 19th in the Electoral College?
I think we have to get through the Electoral College because there's this, movement, so to speak, of telling electors not to vote the way they're supposed to. I don't think that's going to necessarily go anywhere. But, even though the recount's over, the Electoral College will be over, these people aren't going to accept the results of a Trump presidency ever. I mean, you remember President Bush in 2000, and they didn't accept his presidency even after he was elected for a second time.
Yeah.
It was constantly not my president. President Bush is an illegitimate president. He didn't win the popular vote, and therefore he's not the president. I mean, this is the same stuff we've been hearing from the same people who claimed it was horrible for Trump to, take a step back and say, maybe we should wait till the results come in and make sure there's no fraud before we accept them. And here we are a month after the election with these people still throwing a temper tantrum because they didn't get their way.
Where have you landed on President-elect Trump? I mean, obviously, you didn't hide the fact that you were critical of him going into the going into the election. But since he's become President-elect Trump, I'm very curious to know what you think so far of some of the cabinet picks, what you think of some of the actions that he's taken so far. Where's your head at on our President-elect?
I actually think that his cabinet choices are very good choices. I think that his judgment on that has been good. And, he said on the campaign trail he wanted to put the best people around him. I think he's doing that in a lot of ways, which is good. I think that these decisions with, negotiating one-on-one with these companies are good short-term. But I'm not a big fan of bullying companies and threatening them if they happen to take advantage of the free market system and move their companies around, especially considering Donald Trump has done that, right? So I'm looking forward to seeing how he's going to work with the new Congress. I think it's exciting to see Republicans gearing up to actually get a bunch of stuff done. And I think that he'll probably reduce some corporate tax rates and repeal Obamacare, at least in some sense, which I think will be very helpful. And obviously the market has responded to his presidency in a positive way, not in a negative way, as everyone said it would be.
What do you think of Linda McMahon, wife of Vince McMahon? Anything about that cabinet appointment that stands out to you?
I mean, she ran for Senate in Connecticut, I believe it was, and lost. But she's been around politics, and also in business for a very long time. I mean, who doesn't like the WWE factor, right? Get in there and slam some folks down. I think she'll probably do a good job. She has corporate experience. She's a female, which obviously looks good and can kind of tamp down these ridiculous accusations from the left that he's not diverse enough. I think she'll probably do a good job.
And we can now say that we have a president and a cabinet member that have been stunned by Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Exactly.
The first time in history.
Katie, now are you still in New York right now? Or are you back? Are you back in DC?
Nope, I'm back in DC. So.
I was looking at a post you had put up on Instagram supporting our law enforcement. We've got an issue here, a couple of different things, but most specifically, the Minneapolis City Council approved a budget, big tax increase. Part of that though is hiring 15 more police officers, and we actually had a group of activists, essentially community members here in downtown Minneapolis, who got up on the mic and said no more cops, basically complaining that they didn't want to see more cops on the street. They wanted more money directed, or the extra money, the $16 million coming in tax revenue from the tax hike, to go to social justice programs. We've been talking quite a bit about the fact that hopefully with the Trump administration, at least even just on a getting out from underneath a federal government that has not had law enforcement back in this country, and hoping that this administration obviously will do that it'll stem the tide of this anti-cop, rhetoric and narrative that's formed over the course of the past few years. What kind of optimism do you have in that regard, where it feels like right at the moment we're almost at a fever pitch of anti-cop sentiment?
Yeah, I mean, we are certainly in a place that I haven't seen. And when I talk to cops all over the country, and I know a lot of them through some of the firearm training that I've done, the first thing they say is everyone hates us now, which I think is, first of all, not true. I mean, if you look at the polling, the vast majority of the country has respect for law enforcement. But because the media machine and these activist groups, take up so much of the oxygen, that's how they feel. And the problem is that they then take that pressure, and it makes its way into their last, split-second decisions out in the field that can be deadly. I mean, there was that Chicago police officer who didn't want to pull her gun on a suspect because she was afraid of what the media response would be, and she almost died because the suspect beat her up so badly. And that's a result of not wanting to be the subject of an unfair, ongoing witch hunt just simply because you happen to be dealing with a black suspect, no matter what the facts of the case are. Are there problems in law enforcement? Sure. But this idea that we've painted all of them in this horrible light, I really think has done a lot of damage, not only just to the morale of our police, but also to the future generations of people who maybe thought about going into law enforcement work who are changing their minds, right? So I'm hoping that the narrative changes. The Justice Department will certainly take a different approach, since Loretta Lynch and Eric Holder won't be running the Civil Rights Division anymore. But I do think that the activist groups are just going to get louder and more brazen now that they're not in control and need to kind of make some more noise. And the media will follow right up with that.
Well, and I think that's going to be the curious thing to watch, because I think there is a potential here for, at least in the short term, for things to get worse before they get better, from the standpoint of, these individuals, these groups, these local activists, nationwide, have, I don't want to say have had free reign, but they've had what at least on perception wise, on appearance, was the backing of this past administration, and certainly the support of local leadership. And I think as they begin to feel the pressure that the narrative is changing, and we're already seeing that, and we can talk a bit about it just in terms of the anti-Trump ridiculousness that's been happening on the left. I can't help but wonder if it's going to get worse before it gets better from these groups that are going to start getting desperate and getting louder and more vocal as they fear their influence slipping away.
Yeah, I think they'll get pretty loud. There was a lot of anti-war protesting that went on during the Bush administration, and then suddenly it stopped during the Obama administration, despite the same wars going on. So, these are the same leftist people who have been somewhat dormant for a while on a bigger scale than we've seen through Black Lives Matter or Occupy Wall Street will certainly be back, and they're going to try to do everything they can to disrupt everything. I mean, Michael Moore is already calling to disrupt the inauguration, despite the fact that it's a duly Democratic elected president. I mean, right. Why would you do that, right? So they're going to do everything they can to disrupt what's going to happen. So I think people should just be ready for that, and to be ready to debunk the media narrative when conservatives dare to criticize these groups for what they are.
Shifting back to Trump's cabinet picks, you and I have both been, I think, fair to classify it as pleasantly surprised with the nature of his picks. I think he's put together a really really solid cabinet so far, and not a cabinet that too many conservatives can find much to disagree with. Are you hearing anything regarding the Secretary of State appointment going forward? I know that's the big one that's still sort of looming out there.
No, I mean, I know that the list has gone from 4 to 10. Was then back to 4. It's now back to 10. So they're keeping everyone on their toes. I'm not sure who it's going to be, but I think that they should be taking their time, especially on the Department of State, considering the last administration and our standing in the world. I think it's really important to follow up with someone who can kind of clean up John Kerry and Hillary Clinton's mess, so to speak. It really is a person who's going to represent America around the world, and I think that Donald Trump probably has a huge interest in making sure that person has the right message based on his feelings towards the rest of the world. So I don't know how long it's going to take. He said most of everything will be announced by next week. Maybe that'll be the case, but it's clear that the Secretary of State position is taking a lot more time and consideration than the other positions have.
Little breaking news popping up on my Twitter feed right now. Donald Trump had a big meeting last night with none other than Leonardo DiCaprio.
I don't know.
Met with
Al Gore. That kind of thing drives me crazy.
Maybe he's a fan of The Revenant.
No.
Maybe he's just a fan of his movies.
Nobody was a fan of The Revenant. The meeting lasted 90 minutes, and they discussed green jobs and environmental policy.
What? Why?
I hope
Why?
he's placating.
Did he fly there on his private jet, or did he take the subway?
Right. Hey, I would encourage everybody to go to townhall.com. I know your most recent article there, Republicans in trying to set the stage for Mattis, the defense secretary. And just one last question on that, Katie, and then we'll let you go. But what were your thoughts on Mattis? Do you think that was a good pick?
I love him.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be great. I think one part of what hasn't been discussed a whole lot in the Obama administration is the rules of engagement and how deadly they've been to our own troops and to other troops in Afghanistan and Iraq. I mean, 80% of troop casualties in Afghanistan have occurred under President Obama, and it's because he forces people who have been trained to do their jobs to second-guess their decisions.
Yep.
And I really hope that someone like James Mattis can come in and change those rules, obviously in a humane way. We're not saying there shouldn't be any rules of engagement, but in a sense that doesn't put our troops in danger when they're having to carry out a mission. So I think he's a great choice. He's gotten some praise from both Democrats and Republicans. So I think he'll be good. And he seems like he has a pretty good attitude of, we're going to get things done and don't care much about what you think to the rest of the world, which I'm okay with.
Fox News contributor, editor at townhall.com. Assault and Flattery is her latest book. Are you going to be on TV anytime soon?
I will be on Neil Cavuto's show today at 4 o'clock.
All right. Check out Katie there. Thank you so much, as always, for the time. It was great talking with you.
Thanks.
We'll talk to you next week. Thanks, Katie.